What is the history of the U.S. gold standard?
You can turn back now, or learn the stuff they don't want you to know.
Yeah, dude, I get it. I'm just saying it's our show. So, this week, Matt and I covered gold. Why do we use gold? And by we, I don't mean just us guys. I mean, why does civilization get so hung up on gold? How much gold actually exists in the world? We answer some of these questions in our first two videos this week, and today we wanted to tackle the history of the gold standard in the United States. So let's start at 1792, when then Treasury Secretary Alexander Hamilton passes the first Coinage Act. And this begins a period of what we would call basically silver. I mean, they even refer to it as basically silver in congressional reports. And that's because the United States did not originally begin as a place on the gold standard. Instead, they had a bimetallic standard, which of course, as you can tell, is just a fancy way of saying they accept both silver and gold. And the reason that they do this is because they're already using some silver currencies. These Spanish milled silver coins are pretty much accepted money in the United States for quite a while. Now, the United States did something unusual here. It's a little bit technical. They set the values of gold and silver to concrete static ratios. And what they said was that they would have a standard of 15 to 1. That would be 15 silver, 1 measure of gold. And this kind of worked, but the problem was because the rest of the world had their ratio at 15.5 silver to 1 gold, a bunch of gold left the country, just skedaddled in trade. And as a result, most of the money people were using was silver. So if we go to 1834, we get to a kind of a basically gold standard, because the Treasury said, you know what, we're going to set the value at 16 silver to 1 measure of gold. And this means, you got it, a bunch of silver left the country and people were essentially using gold. And some other interesting stuff happened at that time period as well. The simplest way to say it is that people discovered just tons of gold. Like, gold discoveries were so prevalent that they drove down the price of gold. So even the small silver coins that people were using started to disappear from circulation. So in 1853, the US decides that we're going to have the intrinsic value of silver coins and the face value of those coins not quite match up, because we need people to have coins so they can make change. So we started detaching a little bit of the value, the issued value, from the intrinsic or inherent value. So just think of it like a coin, right? And then just the material used to make that coin, if it's melted down, just that lump of silver might actually be worth more than the coin's printed face value. But of course, as we all know, that was not the case forever, because from 1862 to about 1879, we actually started using fiat money or paper money. And if you've seen our earlier episodes, then you know what the definition of fiat money is. It's not at all a controversial thing to use that term. That's the real name for it. Just a lot of people don't agree with the idea, right? So why do we do this? Well, a lot of it comes from the Civil War. Now, up to this point, people are still exploring ways to make trade work. We started off with foreign coins, the Spanish coins again, and then we also saw banks issuing notes, promissory notes essentially, where they say, okay, well, Farmer John, thanks for your gold, here's a coupon, basically. And in a way, that's kind of what money functions as today, just the middle ground in transactions. So one of the key points of the paper money used during the Civil War was that it was not convertible to gold or silver, meaning that often you would have this paper that had a value to use in transactions, but you couldn't really go to someone and say, let me trade this in for the promised amount of gold or silver, which makes it just fiat currency. Boom, 1879. This period, starting in 1879, going to about 1933, is often thought of as the true gold standard period in US history. But During this time, a lot of stuff was still happening. The United States, although it did go back to the gold standard, had repeated efforts to try to remonetize silver, to bring silver back into the game for a couple reasons. They're pretty common sense reasons. First, of course, it makes sense not to have all your eggs in one proverbial basket. Secondly, it gives you more of a diversified way to conduct trade with the rest of the world. One of the notable events that occurred during this time period was what's called the Gold Standard Act of 1900. Not the most creative name, but it gets the point across, right? And the idea was that the US would reaffirm its commitment to the gold standard. This was a way of increasing the stability and the worldwide regard of the US dollar. And let's keep in mind that banknotes at the time are circulating. This is kind of like privately made money, and people are using it in transactions the way you would use currency, but it's not necessarily legal tender. And let's take a note here for a second. What is legal tender, right? It's a good question. We see it on dollar bills. We see it on even the old silver certificates that came out under Kennedy. Essentially, legal tender is something that you are obligated to accept payment in a country. So this means that, for instance, the US dollars, if someone is paying you in US dollars, that counts as legal tender for legal purposes. And now the moment we have all been waiting for. You may remember a little thing called the Federal Reserve, created by the Federal Reserve Act in 1913 after a wildly controversial, incredibly contentious, unpopular battle in court that culminated actually with some people having a secret meeting in Jekyll Island. That's not even a conspiracy rumor. It's true. They secretly left on a train and made what became the Federal Reserve Act, and it wasn't that popular from the beginning. Some people would say it's unpopular now, but what it did actually do is create the first functioning modern central bank for the United States. The creation of the Federal Reserve, however, did not spell the doom of the gold standard. That didn't happen until 1933, when the US government halted the controvertibility, again, the ability to return these dollars, these coupons, and get a set amount of gold or silver. They halted that in 1933, and then they also nationalized the private gold supply, which, as you know, nationalize is often treated as a dirty word in modern times, but it happened in the United States with gold, which was literally one of the most valuable, important things that people had. So this period of 1933 begins what's known often as the Quasi gold standard. And that's weird. How can you have a sort of gold standard? Here's how the US did it. Notes that are issued by the Fed are not themselves redeemable for gold or silver. However, gold can still be used by the US government in official international transactions only. So for example, if we were living back in that time and we wanted to buy something, we couldn't legally pay with gold, or we weren't really supposed to, but if we were the US government and we were, say, concluding a trade deal with some Western European nation, then we could use gold in that transaction. So it's kind of depends on who you are for whether or not you're allowed to use gold that way. Sounds like an unsustainable situation, right? You're absolutely correct, because in 1973 through 1976, the United States started to abandon the gold standard entirely, entering into what could often be called just fiat money. Now, we saw some really interesting comments on the earlier episodes that we put out here. People have been talking about the petrodollar, which is a great topic that I'd like to dig into more. People have also been talking about fractional reserves. This is the idea that a bank could, or a money issuing authority, to make it even more general, could simply issue more currency or value than they actually possess. So they could leverage a smaller amount of something by creating more value around it. This would be, for example, if you had 5 bars of gold, 5 cows, it doesn't matter, 5 units of value, right? And then you say, okay, I'm gonna leverage those 5 units to actually issue money for 10, or 100, or hey, how many can I get away with? Is the question. But to explain fractional reserves, to examine that and its effects on the global and the local economies of the world, we are going to have to go to a different video. This was just a quick breakdown of some periods of the gold standard in the United States. We'd love to hear what you think. Do you believe that a gold standard should be used? Do you believe that fiat money is good or bad? And why is it so prevalent? You can find Matt and I on Facebook. You can find us on Twitter. You can always drop us a line at conspiracy@discovery.com. And as always, thank you so much for watching. We are going to explore secret places next week, and secret places across the world. Some of the world's most secretive places. Now, if you're still watching, I guess the videos have popped up on the side here, then I'll give you a spoiler alert for sticking with us till the end of the video. North Sentinel Island.